Today we're going to be looking at the 9950 X3D and how I set up my BIOS and my PBO for this CPU, and a couple of other tips and tricks of just what I've found so far. So I just got my 9950 X3D in and I got it all installed. I already put a video up. I'll have it linked about how I cool it and everything, but in there I talk about how I install my cooler, and some of the performance and how well it works. But the second half of that picture is how I run my PBO. And I've made some PBO videos about my 9800 X3D and a couple of the other CPUs that I run. And really, the quick rundown is there's not really going to be anything super new here, but I'll go through and just show you kind of how I set up my 9950 X3D. So the first thing is I didn't immediately update my BIOS, and the good news is if you were already set up to run an X3D or had relatively recent board that shipped, it recognized the CPU no problem. But I did go ahead and I checked the website and it said, hey, there's expanded compatibility for the 9950 X3D. So I went ahead and updated the BIOS. You can see the build date there, March 4th. It's pretty recent. And then I came in here and I got to work. So I'll kind of go from the top down, just what we did. This is the same RAM kit. I didn't even touch the RAM. It's the 6000 CL26 64 gig kit that I recently made a video on my 9800 X3D. I swapped that RAM in, got it tuned, and then I swapped CPUs now. So we're on to the new one. So first thing, you always want to turn on Expo. You see I got my Expo 6000 CL26 at 1.4 volts in there. I'm not messing around with any sort of e-clock or anything like that. I did take, just to keep all things even, because I'm going to do a comparison in performance on the 9800 X3D versus this new 9950 X3D. I wanted to keep the RAM tune the same, so I haven't done a lot of exploration to see, if this is capable of anything better. But I went ahead and ran it at 6200 megahertz, so a little above the Expo profile, and same settings as we did before. We'll go into PBO first, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the RAM. So when we come into PBO, we want to go ahead and get PBO enabled. I put it in manual, and then medium load boost it. This is an Asus thing. I don't really know exactly what it does. It says enabling may help improve performance under medium loads. The little Asus AI thing said it recommended it being on, so I turned it on. I don't really know if it's really doing much for me, though. That's a brand specific thing. But for PBO, I put it in manual, and I put all the limits at 1,000. So many times, if you just put it to motherboard limits, it'll be 1,000, or if you do it manual, you just set it to 1,000. This is one I get feedback on a lot. People will be like, hey, you're going to tell people to fry their CPU or it's going to destroy it or yada, yada, yada. And I've gone over this a bunch, but I'll kind of set it up one more time. So PBO still automatically manages the processor, and it manages it within a set of rules. And so it has limitations. When I set this to 1,000, there is no way that it's ever going to hit 1,000. In fact, my setup is going to run lower than factory. What I'm doing by setting this to 1,000 is I'm removing power limitations from the equation, because I don't want to be well under my thermal limit and well under my frequency limit, and for some reason it say like, oh, I pulled a certain amount of power, I'm going to go ahead and stop giving you any further performance, because I just know that it's probably not going to be a scenario, but in the off chance that it is, I just want to remove this from the equation. So I'm saying like, hey, you take as much power as you need and do with it as you will. Now, if you are in a thermal constrained situation, this is not always the best. So I know that my cooler is very, 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 very capable. So I'm not going to care how much power it pulls, because I know that I have the capability to cool it. I have a 9600X that's in a small form factor ITX build, And I do manually tune these in that build because I want to basically limit my thermals through the use of the power limits. So in that case, it's not just bouncing off the thermal limiter and then I don't know what it's drawing back, and it could potentially lead to stuttering or other undesirables. So it's kind of two different scenarios. I know that in this PC, it's going to be able to handle whatever I throw at it. So I just put it at the limits, and I understand it's never going to pull anywhere close to this. In gaming, I've been pulling like 130 to 140 watts, and that's it. I'm basically just removing the power limitations from the equation, but the processor is still only going to use the power that it needs. I'm just removing it as a limitation. But we still make sure we still monitor it, and it still stays within safe limitations. For the scaler, I've had a lot of in-depth talks on this as well. You can review some of my, like, I think it's my 9950 video that I talk about this, and a couple of the other ones. If you're uncomfortable with the scaler, you can leave it at 1. It's a very minimal performance boost. I find that when it basically what scaler does is it more aggressively seeks voltage, and I find that sometimes you can go a little bit deeper on your curve shaper and curve optimizer when you run additional scaler, because you're basically saying, hey, you need less voltage to run a given frequency, but then you're allowing it to seek voltage a little more aggressively. With this set at 10, I've monitored with Hardware Info 64, and my peak V-core still is 1.35, which is acceptable on this CPU, in my opinion. So that's how I run it. I'm basically saying, like, hey, you can aggressively seek voltage. If you're uncomfortable with that and you want to leave some more safety margin in there, just leave it at 1x. But then if you do have some problems running, some of the curve shaper settings that I have, just be aware. You might need to dial it back a little bit, because if it's not seeking voltage as much, you might have some instability issues. But that's just my findings that I've seen with it. But that is the way it is. So these two things are the two things that I probably get the feedback on the most. And anytime you're overclocking, there is some risk there, but I'm kind of leaning heavy on that. PBO does a very good job managing itself. I'm just changing some of the rules in which it operates. So these at 1,000, this at 10, I'm basically saying you have no power limit and you can aggressively seek voltage, but it's still going to be within the CPU's limitations, which on this one's going to be that 1.35 volt. So next up, the Fmax override. So with this, I'm just going to set it to the max of 200. Same thing. I'm not overclocking by 200 megahertz. I'm raising the ceiling by 200 megahertz. If the CPU cannot achieve that, then it's not going to achieve that. And you see that all the time. The cores on this are 5.7 gigahertz, so plus 200 would be 5.9. It's not just running 5.9 gigahertz all the time. I'm just saying, hey, if you do have the headroom, so if the voltage works out, if the thermals work out, if the power limits, which we've now removed, so that's not really a factor, work out, you can boost up to that high. So that's the kind of the way I do it, is I'm giving the system as much freedom as I can to seek more performance, knowing that I have the ability to cool it, and that I'll continue to monitor the voltage and make sure it's good. But so far, it's been awesome for me. So that's what you got here on the main page. And then you come down, you have the curve optimizer and curve shaper. So the thing to remember about these is they're additive. So whatever you have in the optimizer is going to be added to the shaper. The optimizer just goes across the board, and shaper you can fine tune for different profiles. So when I come in here to the optimizer, this is the one thing I was a little bit disappointed in. And when I didn't immediately update the BIOS, I thought, oh, well, maybe I just need to update the BIOS. But with the new BIOS, it didn't change anything. So you have auto, all core, or per core. I was hoping there would be a per CCD option, which I believe on my 9950X there is, but now I'm not seeing that on the 9950X3D because you have one CCD that has the additional cache, that's the X3D, and then you have one CCD that has no extra cache but a higher frequency. We're kind of getting the best of both worlds. We got one CCD that's basically a 9800X3D, and we got one CCD that's basically the second half of a 9950X, and they're sandwiched together. So I was hoping you could tune per CCD because I might tune one different than I would tune the other. But unfortunately, that's not an option, at least so far on this. So for Curve Optimizer, I came in here all core -10. I don't like going super aggressive on this on the high core count CPUs. So you'll find that many times, like on my 9600, when it's just a 6 core, I'll just set this like right to -30 or something like that and not even worry about it because they just seem to have an easier time running it at a higher negative, probably because there's just less cores, less heat, less everything, but less voltage across the board, less of everything. So it has an easier time. My experience has been on the high core count CPUs like the 9950, 9950X3D, all those. If you set this too aggressively across all the cores, you'll get crashing coming like off of idle. So you'll be like, oh, I'm not doing anything. I try to launch a game and crash. So I just set this something easy, like -10. Almost any CPU can run -10. And I just kind of baseline that where it's at. Then I come into the curve shaper, and this is where I start fine tuning for the applications that I want. So in my case, specifically gaming. So min frequency, I just don't even mess around with that. I've just already got the -10 across the board. If it's min frequency, the PC is basically idle. Why do I care about performance at idle? I just want stability. So I leave that as is. So you can just figure from the optimizer, this is -10 across the board. Then we come into medium frequency. Medium frequency, all of them, the low temperatures, I don't mess around with. What I'm really targeting the most is this medium temperature, because the medium temperature, I believe, is about 50 degrees Celsius. And in gaming, I'm able to keep my system under that pretty much full time. So I go the most aggressive on this medium temperature. So right now I've got it set up for medium frequency, medium temperature, -15. So like I said, they're additives. So -15 plus -10 is -25. Then as the temperature increases, I give it a little bit back because that'll add to stability. So if for some reason I was in a load where the temperature did get hot, or maybe in the summertime the ambience climb and it runs a little hotter, I draw that back to -10. So once again, it's additive. So -10 plus -10 will be -20. And I basically run that for the medium frequency, high frequency, and max frequency. And I run that across the board the same way. Now, I will kind of take a time out on this for a second. And I just got this CPU installed. But what I'm finding so far is with the new 9000 series, the 9950X3D, the dual CCD, AMD claims that they have basically solved all these lassoing problems and the dual CCD and everything. And the initial stuff they put out said, hey, you do not need to reinstall Windows anymore. That was a 7000 series. If you went from single CCD to dual, you would need to reinstall Windows for it to pick up appropriately. And this is where I'm at. I did a little bit of searching, and another user basically said, hey, they're like almost correct, but I did find some performance in certain applications by reinstalling Windows. And then they were kind of like, hey, you don't have to like fresh install. You can just go into Windows Update and say reinstall Windows, and it'll re-download, reinstall, and keep all your apps and everything the same. What I have found so far is that I've had a little bit of problems, and the hard thing is I've done a lot in a little bit of time. I installed the CPU, I overclocked it. I'm trying to get initial testing. I'm trying to compare it to the 9800X3D, so I probably need to slow down a little bit. But I'm a little bit time constrained because I got to go back to work. But what I found is this thing is absolutely rock solid. And then there was like a couple of my games that they would just not even launch. Like, not that it would crash, it just would not even attempt to launch. It was like I didn't even click it. So to me, because it's not crashing, it's just not even attempting to launch it, whether I try to do it from Steam or locate the exe. I think it's probably more of an actual Windows issue. My problem is this is my daily driver and I've got a lot of stuff on this PC. So what I need to do is I need to go through and back it all up, and I've done so many configuration changes. It's like the most simple thing in the world. I need to do a complete wipe and fresh install of Windows. It's just time. I just haven't been able to I haven't been able to do it yet. Maybe I'll do it next week. But I say all that because I actually initially got way more aggressive on some of this curve shaper, and the CPU was regularly hitting 5.95 gigahertz on the non-cache cores, and I believe 5.725 on the cache cores. Uh, and it was running a lot of stuff fine. Like, I was able to run Cinebench, and I ran quite a few games. And then I got into some of the problems with some of the games, and I was like, maybe I got a little too aggressive. So I came in here and I reduced this down to what we see now. And my performance has still been very good. On Cinebench R24, I was over 2,500, which I think is pretty solid. I think stock, they're running about 23 or so with this setup. And 90% of everything I've asked it to do has worked perfectly fine. The main thing I think of is Baldur's Gate 3. For some reason, I really wanted to test Baldur's Gate 3, and it just will not even attempt to launch. So I'm beginning to think that it's more of just a Windows problem. I've had too many configuration changes. I probably need to either just reinstall the game or reinstall Windows, because no matter what I've done in here, it just won't launch. I even set this back to just default and it wouldn't launch. So I don't think it's an overclocking or a CPU problem. I think it's just I've had too many configuration changes and I need to do some house cleaning, honestly. So even if they say you don't have to, I personally, uh, if you plan on buying the CPU, I would just plan on backing up and just doing a fresh install of Windows. It's good to do that house cleaning from time to time anyway. So that would be my strategy. So that's what we got for our PBO settings. Once again, we just removed the power limit. I set the scaler high just so it can seek voltage. And then we increase the F max so it has that headroom if it wants it. And then we work a conservative curve optimizer and then really shape it with the curve shaper for that, focusing on that medium temperature setting to get our most aggressive reduction. Okay, so moving on from there, we go into our more into our DRAM stuff. So this is the G.Skill 6000 CL26, and it's just like I set up on my 9800X3D. Pretty much my strategy here was I came in to the memory presets, loaded the 6200 2x32. It actually increased TRP and TRAS and a couple of these things. So I did a combo. I used the preset, then I reset these top four to my kit's Expo settings, and then I just refresh interval, maxed that out, and came in here with a couple of other known settings that I just changed. But that was kind of my down and dirty, was I used a combo of a known preset just to quickly fill it out more aggressively. Then I came back in any Expo settings that were already tighter than that. I reformed and then I maxed out the refresh interval. That is like a down and dirty way to get much tighter timings on a short timeline. If you, eventually I'll go through here and test everything more extensively. But I ran this on my 9800X3D, and I'm running on this now, and I've had no problems so far. So that's kind of how I did the RAM, and I already kind of went through that on the 9800X3D as well. And then for the VRMs, CPU load line calibration, I just find when you start getting aggressive with the curve shaper, going to the level 5 helps you out with stability. And so basically it'll reduce the droop between loads so that it's a little more stable. And I've just always ran it that way, and it seems to work. And then we came down here, and the only thing I did was when Windows started giving me some problems, I thought like, well, maybe it's the memory thing. My other CPU ran this great. I was running it at 1.435, and on this one, I just went into high voltage mode and gave it a tiny bit extra, 1.45 volt. That's perfectly safe. They're selling Expo kits now that are 1.45, so I just increased the VDD just to make sure that my RAM wasn't the issue, and I don't think it is. It's going to require some more testing to make sure that everything here is rock solid. Like I said, I just got this CPU yesterday, but this is my initial swag of how I'm going to set mine up. And I haven't had time to do like full benchmarking. I've ran a couple games on it, a couple different things, but I can tell you that I think I'm moving in the right direction, because when I Googled it, it's just one data point, It's not even really gaming specific, but most people on Cinebench R24 were getting about 2,300 good samples. We're doing like low 2,400. And on my first run of it, I got 2552. So I already think I'm doing pretty well with this. And then the initial games I was looking at, this has been like dead on with the performance I had on my 9800 X3D, and I had it tuned as well. So that tells me we're right in the ballpark for gaming, because most reviewers have already gotten the word out. I mean, pretty much you're not going to find additional performance with this, but it's pretty much dead even with the 9800 X3D on gaming. And then you have that addition of having those extra cores for productivity as well. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. And then also of note, my 9950X on Cinebench, my best run also was like mid to low 2500. So right there, it's only one data point on kind of a synthetic benchmark, but I'm already seeing my gaming performance is about equal to my 9800 X3D, and my workstation performance is about equal to my 9950X on that one data point. So far, I'm very impressed with the CPU, and this is personally how I'm going to run mine. If you're worried about your cooling capability or worried about longevity or anything like that, all I would do is, rather than coming in here and going manual, you can just turn it to enable and let it do its own thing, and then you could run scalar at 1. And I think you'd be perfectly fine, most likely. I mean, it's going to depend on the condition of your silicon, but you'd probably be fine to run these settings, because these are already a little bit dialed back from what I had, because like I said, I was trying to make sure everything was stable, and I had it a little more aggressive at first, and it was doing good with the scalar and the maxed out power settings. But anytime you're overclocking and changing settings, there's always some risk to it. I'm comfortable running mine this way, and that's how I got it set up. And the performance so far has been really impressive to me. So that's kind of where we're at. Good luck building, and have fun gaming out there.